Chapter 8. No one is safe. My father replied to the Taliban the next day in a letter to the newspaper. Please don't harm my school children, he wrote, because the God you believe in is the same God they pray to every day. You can take my life, but please don't kill my school children. His letter appeared in the paper along with his full name and the address of our school, even though my father had written only his name. Our phone started ringing that night. Friends called to thank my father for speaking up. You have put the first stone in standing water, one said. Now many will have the courage to speak up. But not many people did. My father had always been a busy man, participating in mushaira, poetry concerts, working late at school, helping neighbors settle disputes. But now when he left home, I felt like the little 3-year-old I once was when he would climb down the ladder at the school to fix the well. I wondered each night if he would come back. After the letter arrived, my father had made a decision. The boys at the Kushal school would no longer wear the uniform of shirt and trousers. These supposedly Western clothes marked them as identifying with infidels in the eyes of the Fazlallah's followers. So, for their safety, he had the boys switch to the traditional tunic and pants of the shalwar kameez. I still wore my blue and white shalwar kameez, but the Taliban said girls should not wear the white shalwar. The uniform I once loved now made me feel like a criminal. Suddenly, everywhere I looked, the Taliban seemed to sprout like weeds. And then I thought, what have I done wrong that I should be afraid? All I want to do is go to school, and that is not a crime, that is my right. Besides, I was the daughter of Zayuddin Yousafzai, the man who had dared to talk back to the Taliban. I would hold my head high, even if my heart was quaking. That fall, in October 2007, something happened that gave us hope. Benazir Bhutto, who had been the first female prime minister of Pakistan, was returning to run in that year's election. She had been living in exile in the United Kingdom since I was 2 years old, but I had been hearing about her for years. As a woman, she was a role model for girls like me, and she was the only politician who'd had the courage to speak out against the terrorists. Our whole family was glued to the TV when her arrival was broadcast. We watched her weep as she stepped onto Pakistani soil for the first time in almost 9 years. My mother was moved by this, but was also afraid for her. She said to the TV, "Did you come for death?" Everyone knew it was dangerous for her to return, but we had hoped for her safety. Not long after that, just over 2 months later, she was dead. It happened right in front of my eyes as I again watched her on TV. I will defeat the forces of extremism and militancy with the power of the people, she declared. Then she stood on the seat of her bulletproof vehicle to wave to her supporters. There was a crack of gunfire and the roar of an explosion. I watched, breathless, as she sank down inside the car. My mother, my father, and my grandmother burst into tears. Benazir Bhutto was the first woman attacked by the terrorists. Despite the fear we all felt for her, we were not expecting them to attack a woman. The killing of women is prohibited by the Pashtunwali Code. We were shocked. I found myself oddly still. My first thought was this. If Benazir Bhutto can die, no one is safe. No one was safe in Pakistan. Not the women who were forbidden to walk the streets of their own towns. Not the men who were being flogged to death for petty reasons. Not the children who worked in the trash heap. Not even the children like me who just wanted to go to school. As I looked at the TV, a tiny voice in my heart whispered to me, "Why don't you go there and fight for women's rights? Fight to make Pakistan a better place." I had recently done interviews with the TV news channel Dawn and Khyber News about girls' education, and although I had been nervous, I had made it through, and I had liked it. As everyone around me cried, I kept my secret. I told myself, I will continue this journey of fighting for peace and democracy in my country. I was only 10, but I knew then that somehow I would find a way. Chapter 9, Candy from the Sky. One day in the autumn of 2007, we were sitting in class when we heard a fearsome roaring from outside. Everyone, students and teachers, ran out of the courtyard and looked up. A swarm of giant black army helicopters darkened the sky overhead. They whipped the wind around us and stirred up a storm of dirt and sand. We cupped our hands over our ears and tried to yell at one another, but our voices were drowned in the din. Then there was a plunk as something landed on the ground at our feet. Plunk, plunk, plunk. We screamed, and then we cheered. Toffees! The soldiers were tossing candy down to us. We laughed our heads off as we went scrambling to catch toffees. We were so delighted that it took us a minute to understand what was going on. The Army had come to rescue SWAT from Fazlala. We cheered and clapped and jumped up and down. Candy was falling from the sky, and peace would be coming to SWAT. Soon, soldiers were everywhere. Helicopters were even parked on the Mingora golf course. It was strange to see the Army and SWAT. We'd been praying for someone to stand up to Fazlala and his men with their black turbans and Kalashnikov rifles. But now our town was swarming with men in green uniforms and Kalashnikov rifles. Practically overnight, Fazlala's men disappeared, like snow melting into the ground. But although we could not see them anymore, we knew they had not gone far, only a few kilometers away, and Mingora remained a tense and frightened city. Each day after school, my brothers and I would race home and lock the doors. No more playing cricket in the alley, no more hide-and-seek in the street, no more candy from the sky. One evening, we heard an announcement from the loudspeakers atop the mosque. The Army had imposed a curfew. We didn't know this word, curfew. So I knocked on the wall to Safina's house so someone next door would come to the hole in the wall and explain. Soon, Safina and her mother and brother came to our house and told us it meant we had to stay indoors for certain hours of the day and always at night. My brothers and I were so scared we didn't even come out of our rooms. We stayed inside and peered through the curtains at the empty street in front of our house. That night, a streak of bright white light flashed across the sky, lighting the room for a second like a flashbulb on a camera. Boom! A thud shook the ground. I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents. Kushal and Atal came running to join us. We had huddled together, shaking. The dishes clattered, the furniture shook, and the windows rattled. Then, within minutes, the Army's gunfire began in the outskirts of the city. With each blast and shot, we gripped one another harder until we drifted off to sleep. The next morning, we woke up as if we were coming out of a long, fitful dream. After a night full of bombing, the air seemed oddly still. We dared to hope. Was it possible that the Army had defeated the Taliban? We peeked out the gate and saw knots of people from the neighborhood gossiping. My father went to find out what had happened. He came back inside frowning. The rumor on the street, the Taliban were going to take control of SWAT. The military operation was ineffective. Our hearts sank. The Army sent 10,000 more men, and the fighting raged on and on, night after night for a year and a half. I was always the first to run to our parents, and my brothers quickly followed. And since the bed was now too crowded, I had to sleep on a pile of blankets on the floor. Even in the middle of a war, I was able to be irritated with these two for stealing my spot. Strange as it sounds, we got used to the bombing and shelling. Sometimes Atal slept through it, and Kushal and I came up with a system to figure out where the fighting was. If the fighting was nearby, the electricity went out. If it was further away, the power stayed on. There were 3 types of attacks, and we learned to distinguish them. Bombing was done only by the Taliban, sometimes by remote control, but other times by suicide bombers. Shelling from helicopters and cannons fired from mountaintops was the Army. The 3rd type, machine guns, was used by both. I used to get afraid at night, especially during bomb blasts. From my spot on the floor in my parents' room, I recited a special verse from the Holy Quran, the Ayat al-Kursi. Say it 3 times, and your home will be safe from devils and any kind of danger. Say it 5 times, and your neighborhood is safe. Say it 7 times, and your whole town is safe. I said it 7, 8, 9 times, so many times I lost track. Then I spoke to God. Bless us and protect us, I'd say. Bless our father and family. Then I'd correct myself. No, bless our street. No, our neighborhood. Bless all of SWAT. Then I'd say, no, bless all of Pakistan. No, not just Pakistan. Bless the world. I tried to plug my ears and picture my prayers floating up to God. Somehow each morning we awoke safe and sound. I didn't know the fate of all the other people I'd pray for, but I wished for peace for everyone, and especially peace for SWAT. One day my prayer was answered. The Army hadn't won, but had at least driven the Taliban into hiding, if not away. Chapter 10, 2008, What Terrorism Feels Like. Somehow, daily life continued despite the bomb blasts and killing. School remained a haven from the insanity of a city in the middle of a war. It wasn't always possible to attend, but the bomb blast and the curfew, which could be enforced any time of day, and sometimes noisy helicopters flying overhead, made it so we couldn't hear a thing, and on those days, we would be sent home. But if the school opened its doors, I was there, ready to spend time with friends and learn from the teachers. My friends and I had now moved to the upper school, and our friendly competition got even more competitive. We didn't just want to get good grades, we wanted to get top grades. It wasn't just that we wanted to be the best, although we each enjoyed it when we were. It was because when our teachers, like Miss Oliphant in primary school, said excellent or well done, our hearts would fly. Because when a teacher appreciates you, you think, I am something. In a society where people believe girls are weak and not capable of anything, except cooking and cleaning, you think, I have a talent. When a teacher tells you that all great leaders and scientists were once children too, you think, maybe we can be great ones tomorrow. In a country where so many people consider it a waste to send girls to school, it is a teacher who helps you believe in your dreams. And I found a great new teacher in our upper school headmistress, Madam Miriam. She was bright and independent, everything I wanted to be. She had been to college. She had a job earning her own wage. Now that we were in upper school, the subjects became more difficult. We took algebra, chemistry, and my favorite, physics. And even our teachers had only a blackboard and chalk. We were free to go as far as our curiosity would take us. When we were learning about chemistry, one girl stopped the class to ask a question. If everything is made up of atoms, what are atoms made of? Another asked, if electrons are constantly moving, why isn't this chair I'm sitting in moving? The teacher put aside the day's lesson plan, and we all asked questions in our heart's content. But mostly, what we talked about those days was the army and the Taliban. All of the people of SWAT were caught in the middle. One friend used to like to annoy me by saying, Taliban is good, army not good. And I would always reply, when you are caught between military and militants, there is no good. The trips from school had become tense and frightening, and I just wanted to relax once. I was safe inside my home. One day I arrived ahead of my brothers. Thrilled. I didn't have to fight with Kushal for the remote for once, and settled in to watch my new favorite show, Shawarat, which means making mischief. It was just a Bollywood comedy, but I loved it. I turned on the TV, and all I got was static. I switched stations. More static. I tried every station. Nothing but static. At first I thought it was only another annoying power outage. We'd been having them every day, but that night we found out that Fazlala's men had switched off the cable channels. They said that the TV was haram. It showed the westernized world, where women have love affairs and do not cover their hair, with nothing left to watch but the official government television channel. We were all but cut off from the outside world. Fazlala, meanwhile, kept broadcasting his sermons. Girls should stay at home, he preached. We did our best to ignore him until the day I came home to find my father was with his head in his hands. Oh, Johnny, he said, the world has gone mad. Fazlala and his men have blown up the girls' school in Mata. My heart dropped. The school Fazlala had destroyed was a primary school, not even a school that taught teenagers. He had bombed the school at night when it was empty, but how cruel this man was, hurling firebombs at a place where little children only wanted to learn to read and write and add. Why, I wondered. Why was a school building such a threat to the Taliban? I whispered a quick prayer for the children who lost their school and another to protect the Kushal school. Please, God, I prayed, help us to protect our valley and to stop this violence. Every day, Fazlala's men struck a new target. Stores, roads, bridges, and schools. Most of them the attacks were outside of Mingora, but soon they got closer and closer. One day I was in the kitchen cleaning dishes. Despite my best efforts to avoid them, and a bomb went off so close that the house rattled and the fan over the window fell. Before I could even react, the power went out. I learned that this was how it happened. Bomb, then darkness. The Taliban bombed us, and then the power went out for an hour at least. A few days later, the Taliban struck again. A funeral for one of the victims of their last attack was being held in a nearby building. As the mourners gathered to pay their respects, a suicide bomber blasted himself. More than 55 people were killed, including members of Moniba's family. I'd grown up hearing the word terrorism, but I never really understood what it meant, until now. Terrorism is different from war, where soldiers face one another in battle. Terrorism is fear all around you. It's going to sleep at night and not knowing what the horrors the next day will bring. It's huddling with your family in the centermost room in your home because you've all decided it's the safest place to be. It is walking down your street not knowing whom you can trust. Terrorism is the fear that when your father walks out the door in the morning, he won't come back at night. Now the enemy was everywhere and the attacks came out of nowhere. One day a store was destroyed. The next day a house. Rumors flew. The store owner had crossed Fazlala and had helped the army. The man whose house was targeted was a political activist. A bridge was blown up one day, a school the next. No place was safe. No one was safe. Our family tried to carry on as normal, but we were tense all the time. Bombings became such a regular part of our daily lives that we fell into a routine every time we heard a blast. We called to one another to make sure everyone was safe. Kaista, Pisho, Bobby, Kushal, Atal, we cried. Then we listened for the sirens. Then we prayed. This kind of random terror made us do strange things. My father started taking a different route home each evening in case someone was studying his routine. My mother avoided the market and my brother stayed inside, even on the sunniest days. And since I had been in the kitchen both times there were blasts near our house, I stayed as far away from that room as possible. But how can a person live when she is afraid of her room in her own house? How can a mother buy food for her family if the market is a war zone? How can children gather for a game of cricket if a bomb could go off under their feet? Nighttime was the worst. When darkness fell, we all startled at every creak and jumped at every shadow. Nighttime was when the Fazlala men carried out the most of their attacks, especially the destruction of schools. So every morning before I rounded the corner on the way to the Kushal school, I closed my eyes and said a prayer, afraid to open them in case the school had been reduced to rubble overnight. This was what terrorism felt like. In 2008 alone, the Taliban bombed 200 schools. Suicide bombings and targeted killings were regular occurrences. Music shops closed. Daughters and sisters were prevented from going to school. And during the month of Ramadan, we had no power or gas in Megora because Fazlala's men had blasted the electricity grid and the gas line. One night when a blast hit, especially close to our home, I went to my father's side. "Are you scared now?" I asked. "At night, our fear is strong, Johnny," he said. "But in the morning, in the light, we find our courage again."